Hello, my name is Steven Cottonrath. I'm the kind of original developer of this class, the online class for virtues and values. And so I just wanted to actually take some time and talk a little bit about how my perspective was as I approached this class. And I realized that for myself as a professor, I oftentimes have questions about, why did this person create the syllabus like this, or choose these books, or what was really the thrust behind the class. So this won't be exhaustive in terms of the what's and whys. I'll leave my contact information and love to talk with you if you have more questions about that, or if it could be a help in any way. But just want to give you kind of a sense of how I approach even kind of week one when I teach this class in person, and the thrust behind it. So my take on the virtues and values class really is steeped in character development. I think that a lot of students, even adult learners, go through these classes, and there's oftentimes a lot of position. There's oftentimes a lot of things that they're learning, where I think a lot of times students and even adult learners will go through classes and they'll take things away from those classes, yet there are often times where it feels like it's not really relatable or helpful because of their position that they're in. And what I love about this particular class is there's a focus on character, and this is really the character class in kind of this set of classes. And character is something that we can always be developing in us, the study of it, the study of virtue and value, and approaching how we see character impact the way that we make decisions. For me, personally, I'll just make this really quick, but my understanding of character development really came from kind of a poor example, or maybe I would say a misunderstood example of what leadership needs to be as I grew up. So I grew up in a context where I was around a lot of people who were great leaders, were very charismatic leaders, who were strong leaders. They'd walk into a room, they'd have command, they'd have the ability to communicate to a room. And I grew up thinking, well, that's a leader, a person who's kind of just born to be a leader. And so as I'm sure you know, the great man theory was something that was a big part of my foundation in my understanding of leadership development. And as I got older, I realized that there were a lot of problems with great man theory, that people who simply thought that leaders were born and not made. There's a lot of limitations to that kind of thinking. There's a lot of unfortunate situations where people get passed up to lead and have opportunities to influence people. And so I started to really think hard about what it meant for me and my understanding of my development of my skills, and even things like collaboration. How could I interact with other people? And so a lot of this focuses in on this idea of developing what you have, regardless of the position that you're in, regardless of any type of authority that you may have to enact change. You can always develop character. And so that's kind of my take on this. And so specifically with this virtues and values classes, I realize it's not labeled character class per se. That's certainly what we're talking about. But here's kind of how I distinguish this idea of virtue versus values. Because I think that it's important that as you facilitate this class, that there is a distinction between these two phrases. We don't use them interchangeably. Obviously you can lean into this and kind of use this differently if you want to, but this is how I approach it. So I think of virtue as something that I'm employing, a character trait in myself as I shoot for a goal or something that I value. So an analogy that I often use is that if we have a bullseye, a target, and there's that center of the bullseye, there's the outer rings of the bullseye as you get further and further out. The bullseye itself is the value, and the arrows that I shoot to hit that bullseye are the virtues. And so let's say that I value education, and so I'm gonna employ the virtues of hard work and patience and really determination and discipline. Those will be the arrows that I use to hit the center bullseye of education. Another example that's sometimes helpful as well is to think of values as different cities. And so I'm here in the LA area, and so thinking about all the freeways that are around us, the 210, the 57, the 405, the 605, the 10 freeway, all these freeways, and there's all these cities that are kind of laid out all over the map. And so if I'm here in Glendora, which that's where I live, that's where I'm from, and I want to get over to Pasadena, then I realize the straight shot for me is to take the 210 freeway headed west. And so if I think of that in this analogy, my goal, Pasadena, my value, the thing that I'm trying to hit, I'm going to employ the 210 freeway in order to get there. Now, oftentimes, as we all know, as leaders throughout our life, we don't oftentimes take the best case scenario, or even just like the most kind of efficient way of getting from point A to point B. Sometimes we take kind of freeways over and about the wrong way for a while, and that's us growing in our character development. That's us understanding that, hey, I want to get to this point, but sometimes very similar to the Israelites in the Exodus, how God had them wander in the desert for a while, developing their identity and their character as a people. That's and eventually hitting their goal, hitting their value. And so those are two examples, the target and then also the freeways and the cities, two examples that may be beneficial as you consider this class and consider how you'd approach it. So virtues and values are very different. I think that they both interact. At times they cross over a little bit in terms of there's certain things that I both see as a virtue and a value. But for the most part, I think the value is the end game, or maybe it's perhaps even my current identity, and the virtue is how I will get there, or perhaps the things that have gotten me here. So that's how I see those things as being different. So all the assignments, they really lend towards that philosophy, that pedagogy, in terms of how we're trying to get ourselves towards an understanding of developing that character. The two books that I have, and this may have changed or may change, we start off with this idea of value from James K. Smith. He's a professor, I believe, at Calvin College in Michigan, and wrote this book, You Are What You Love. It's all about habits and values, and making sure that if you say that you love something, if you are passionate about something, then the truth is that your life will confirm the things that you're passionate about. And so if you care about your family, you're going to step into certain patterns and liturgies that will be obvious to your family that you love and care for them because of the way that you approach your family. And so I think he has a lot of great things here. I think the things to kind of watch out for, I've heard students say that very deep stuff, great examples, that it can be a little bit one note, or maybe perhaps even more, he takes a long time to kind of say the same thing over and over again. And so just be aware of that. I found this book to be really helpful, especially as students were kind of just gearing up, ramping up to get into this conversation about virtue and value. So I start with this, and then this is much more kind of you walk through the whole book. It builds upon each other. It introduces the main idea at the beginning and then moves forward. There's also a lot of good videos that are on his website, and encourage you guys to check those out as well. There's even questions that would be helpful for class as well. The second book that we use is more of kind of like a case study book. So David Brooks, he's a writer for the New York Times, and I see this as kind of a way to understand the whole conversation about what's going to last forever compared to what will people not really care about when you die. And so he talks about this idea of Adam 1 and Adam 2, and discusses this idea of eulogy traits versus resume traits. And so the idea is that we as leaders who are interested in developing character, these big, important ideas as we see people as leaders, that we would work on our eulogy traits, meaning those things that people will talk about while after we're gone, after we're dead, as opposed to simply just the things that are the soft resume, kind of like the LinkedIn endorsements, like, hey, he's a good speaker, or whatever it is. but instead that we would lean on these eulogy things. Hey, he really cared about his family. He was really thoughtful in the way that he approached his work and things like that. And so chapter 1 and then the last chapter kind of bookend this study. Chapter 1, chapter 10 bookend this study on character, and the chapters in between 2 through 9 all offer case studies, historical, biographical case studies, and how those worked out. So this book is, I would say, an easy read. It's kind of very segmented, and so you could even go through the book and not necessarily even have them read it in order. I would say, probably read chapter 1 when at the beginning, 10 at the end. But as far as those middle chapters, it doesn't really matter when you read them. So anyway, that's kind of some of the thinking behind this book. I think a lot of those assignments that are in the syllabus speak for themselves. There's the descriptions there. But if you have any questions at all, I'd be happy to answer those questions. You can reach me at the email address here on the video. You can see right there. And then on my phone number as well. Happy to discuss things further with you. But hey, good luck and God bless as you facilitate this class.